Well, g'day there, and welcome to Faith, Culture, Politics in Australia with Mark. And before I introduce today's guest, just a reminder to hit that like and subscribe button. And as always, you could look at buying me a coffee to support the work that I'm doing. But without further ado, I'll introduce today's guest, who is David Denham, who is an architect. So David was born in 1947 in Melbourne. He's a Bachelor of Architecture from Melbourne University. Practiced as a self-employed architect since 1972, so for 53 years. Currently still practicing. Has worked in firms in Melbourne, London and Queensland as a design consultant. Has created many projects, mainly houses in Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, Western Australia, Bali, Vanuatu and Malaysia. Became interested in the ideology of climate change in the mid-1990s as a result of the Brisbane City Council trying to restrict some aspects of building owing to climate change. David studied the issue, found it to be false, took on the BCC and convinced them to change their policies. David has lectured in CC and falsity of anthropogenic caused global warming for over 4 years. He has written numerous opinion and scientific pieces, some of which have been published overseas through Clintel, the Dutch Climate Intelligence Group, and the GSL Worldwide Society of Geologists, of which both David is an invited member. He is a founding member of Climate and Energy Realists in Queensland. And I welcome David to this stage now. Hello there, David. Great to catch up with you. A bit of an intro there.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, great to have you on. And obviously, it's a very polarizing topic that we're talking about. It's in the media, it's in the international media and the Australian media. So you and I are going to have a bit of a discussion about your thoughts based on all your research and findings that you've done over the years. So good to have you here. Just before, and well, hopefully we can see this, but before we get started then, and if you can't see this, but you should be able to hear it, I might just introduce a couple of little clips because most people know I'm based in South Australia. We've got a Premier and a Labor government that introduced a climate emergency here, declared a climate emergency here in South Australia in 2022. They also had a bid in for the COP summit, which is, we've found out today, we've failed. Australia and South Australia's failed on that to Turkey. Yes, absolutely. And but Peter Malinauskas is openly admitting that we're pushing towards net zero in 2027 and using that as a sort of an election platform as well. So I'm just going to bring up our Premier quickly now and just play this little clip. It's a sort of a cut down clip of a longer one, but I'll play that for you now.
Science is a universal language of truth. So we know that climate change is real. The science is in. There is no sensible debate to be had.
You know,
So that was our Premier, just from a little clip. But I'm just going to play this other one just to tie it all in.
You know, we partnered with Google, for example. If you Google climate change, you will, at the top of your search, you will get all kinds of UN resources. We started this partnership when we were shocked to see that when we Googled climate change, we were getting incredibly distorted information right at the top. So we're becoming much more proactive. You know, we own the science and we think that the world, you know, should know it, and the platforms themselves also do. But again, it is a huge challenge that I think all sectors of society need to be very active in.
So there you go. I'm not sure if the sound was coming through okay with that, and if you heard all that okay. So what's your you've researched climate and renewables and that for a number of years now, obviously as an architect and seeing everything that's involved in having to design homes based on this climate change and that. How does that make you feel when someone comes out and says they own the science and it's settled and the debate's over, from someone that's researched it? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's terribly disturbing, and it probably doesn't matter where you go. You're finding, particularly through mainstream media, and this is getting through to every probably adult that watches the the main channels or the kids at school are getting fed probably the worst lie, I think, which has ever been perpetrated on mankind. And that is the lie of the ideology of that man-made carbon dioxide is changing the temperature of the planet, even at all, let alone catastrophically, as they maintain, that if we keep going the way we're going to go, we're all going to die and shrivel up. I mean, it's disgusting. It's the science is absolutely false. I know you and I aren't going to go into that to a great extent, and we'll do that in another piece at another time, which I look forward to, because there is most definitely absolute science that proves it is impossible for this to happen. But let's take a step back. What about the science that we are being fed? What about the scientists that we're supposed to be listening to? Well, I sent you a little while back an extract which I enjoy. I pulled, there it is. I don't know if you've got it pulled up, but it's pulled out of Hansard, which is our government state of record. And it is the number of times that the CSIRO has been asked to produce empirical evidence that man-made carbon dioxide is causing catastrophic warming between September 2016 and March 2022. And in this is a whole stack of points which come out, and you've got things like the top line is CSIRO admitted that it has never stated that carbon dioxide from human activity poses a danger. Instead, statements of danger came from politicians. You've got another one. CSIRO admitted that today's temperatures are not unprecedented. It just goes on and on and on. There's 20, 30 of them. There's references from international scientists. So it's utterly disgusting that Hansard, which is the record of our own parliament, is embedded in that is the proof that our most eminent scientific body, which is CSIRO, basically, like what you and I are saying now, realizes and will condone that it's all rubbish. And yet the politicians keep going. That's another fact, another thing that you and I will discuss at another time, I believe. It's why particularly left-leaning, and our Labor government in particular, is so enmeshed with this ideology and destroying the future of our country, the prosperity of our country, and our environment all in one foul hit. It really is disgusting. So just one other couple of points I might throw up too. We hear there was something some time back, and I've forgotten the details of this because it's now been disproved to such an extent that it's disappeared. And I think, what was it, 97% of all scientists agree that the ideology is correct. Was that it, Mark? Was it something along those lines, wasn't it?
Yeah. Some of the 97% of scientists agree that climate change is real. Anthropogenic climate change is real. Yep.
Yeah. Well, this came out of a retweet from Barack Obama, and it took hold. And there was a really ill-informed or ideologically driven, I don't know what, scientist actually in Brisbane. I can't remember his name now. But he collected a whole stack of papers together, and there are about 14,000 of them. And he went through them and he came up with this figure somehow. I don't know how he got the figure, but he retweeted that based on the study of some 14,000 papers, that 97% of scientists went off, got to Barack Obama, and Barack Obama retweeted it, and it somehow became fact. All of those papers have since been studied. 65% of them never even mentioned climate change, never even mentioned it. I think when they got to the end, it was about 35 papers or 40 papers out of the 14,000 actually maintained that man-made's contribution of carbon dioxide was affecting the temperature of the climate, and that was all. It was about 30, 40 papers out of 14,000. So that's absolutely false. I've got drawers full of documents and things like that. There's this one here. It's called, you can probably track it yourself. It's called Green Fallacies, and it's some wonderful quotes, 112 quotes by 100 scientists, all with doctorates, who, and it's all various quotes on various aspects, but every single one of them are pointing out that it's all rubbish. So as for the quantity of scientists, there are none. I follow eminent scientists and they're all emeritus. We've got, in our own country here, we've got two great emeritus professors. One's Ian Plimer, who's the emeritus professor of geology at Melbourne University. And the other one is Jennifer Marahasi, who's an eminent emeritus professor. Then you've got international ones like Happer, who's emeritus professor at Princeton University. You've got Professor Linston. And I can remember some of these guys coming on mainstream news in the 90s and saying it was rubbish. And that's why I never paid too much attention to the rhetoric at the time. But Linston was he's the head of MIT and the meteorological department. He's an emeritus professor at Harvard as well. You've got wonderful scientists all over the planet, like Nakamura from Japan, who's professor of science. You've got Tony Heller. You've got Willie Soon. There's some that get their faces out there and write magnificent pieces that totally tear this stuff apart. I've recently written quite a small piece. It's only 4 pages, but the first page is a preamble. The middle 2 are just pure scientific facts. And the final page is a whole stack of quotes from the United Nations admitting that it's rubbish, and people like that. And that went out, that paper was disseminated from the 2 groups that I'm a member of. One is Clintel, which is the Dutch Climate Intelligence Group, which is some 2,000 members, and we petition the UN regularly. The other is the GSL organisation, as you mentioned, which is a worldwide group of geologists, thousands of geologists. I received not one negative response to the science that I've put together, which proves that it's rubbish. But look, we'll get onto that at another, because it's not complex, but I think it deserves a piece on its own. So in terms of scientists out there saying that this is all true and happening, it's a lie, Mark. And it's so distressing to think that's what our children are being taught at school.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just the viewers normally know that when I do upload our discussions, my discussions on my Substack, I usually put a lot of links in there and a bit of information. And what I'll do is I'll attach your paper that you've written, but also the reference to Hansard, which you spoke about as well, so people can see that for themselves from there. So I generally do that. The other thing that comes to mind is some memes. So a meme that comes to mind is 97% of scientists that are paid to say climate change is real agree. So anthropogenic drilling, there's usually those little memes that you see going around with a wad of money there saying, yes, we agree the science is real, and we'll just take our money. Thanks for coming. But yeah, and I've followed a lot of those people that you mentioned. Obviously, I watched Climate the movie. I follow Clintel, see the information on there, CO2 Coalition. So there's some amazing voices talking into this. And but the key thing is what you were just talking about, is the voices that are getting out there, and we're still seeing lots of issues, and we're seeing Australia even being pulled up by the US about the censorship regime in place that we have on lots of things. So Australia seems to be really at the forefront of looking to censor speech that's inconvenient, not so much mis and disinformation, but speech that's inconvenient to their narrative. And so I think it's really important for people to be aware, to share voices like yours and share sort of the smaller alternative media sites as much as possible, because we're obviously up against a massive censorship wall, and that would concern you as well moving forward for kids of the future. I guess having alternative voices censored by the state that has so-called experts.
Could I just add probably that any of your viewers or yourself or anybody out there, if you do come across, and by the way, I don't have any friends, and I do not know anyone personally who believes the ideology I've got hundreds of friends. Being an architect, I do stuff in all states, all other countries and things like that. Most people I talk to accept that it's rubbish. A lot of them know nothing about the science, but it just does not ring true with them. And but I would encourage any one of your viewers that if you come across someone who's adamant that this is a fact and we're all going to die unless we cut back on our CO2 emissions, ask them which scientist they're quoting. Ask them to name the scientific voice that they're echoing, that they're repeating, and you'll watch them go blank because they won't be able to. Because do you know who they all quote? It's Prince Charles, it's his son, it's maybe Lady Gaga, it's Bono. It's all the idiots and the morons floating around the planet who sometimes people pay a lot of money to see or to listen to, but they're all misinformed, unintelligent morons. I'm terribly sorry, and that includes King Charles, who I happen to have met on quite a few occasions. He actually had a long affair with my first girlfriend, so we hooked up at times. But nice guy, but he really is a moron. And most of the people who believe in this stuff usually are, because it is fantasy. And if we were, this has been supposedly happening over the last 100 or so years, are we all dying? They're talking about a degree and a half that we're going to reach by the end of this next century. Well, do you know that the difference in the average temperature between Brisbane and the Gold Coast is 1.3 degrees? So if you happen to live in Brisbane and you come down to visit me, you're obviously going to die. You'll be dead, because I'm 1.3 degrees hotter than Brisbane on average. And we're only warmer here, which is surprising, because Brisbane, being amongst the valleys, has some very, very cold winters, which brings down their average. And we have a very mild, consistent climate here on the Gold Coast because we're next to the ocean. So the ocean, if you live by an ocean, you look at temperatures of places like Hawaii or any islands and things like that, they have very stable temperature. Often even I've dived at places like Upi on the Solomon Islands, which it's got the biggest lagoon in the world, right? It sits right on the edge of it. And in summer, the air temperature at daytime is 28 degrees. The water temperature is 28 degrees. And at midnight, it's 28 degrees, water and air, because it has this huge amount of water next to it, which just keeps everything settled and at that temperature. So, I would encourage any of your viewers to ask who they may be quoting if they come across somebody who's silly enough to believe this stuff.
Yeah, and you raise a good point, because a lot of that happened even during the last 5 years through COVID. You saw all these stars, TV presenters, and all these people, really advocating people to go out and get the COVID vaccine, and it was just a real campaign. And this is what's happened with climate change as well, and rather than having real experts debating each other, say on our $1.2 billion ABC, get them on there and have them debate and show both sides of the story, but instead they're looking at censoring. And I spoke to Katie McCallum, who's the president of Let's Rethink Renewables, and she's been a farmer all her life, and even all the farmers that I do know, there's no evidence for them that they've seen over the 50 or 60 years since they've been around of any changes on the farms or the country that they live in. So it's really just a massive con job in my eyes, I reckon.
It is. I'll chuck in one small one, because it's one that's often raised, is that our oceans are rising, we're all going to drown. We have a static gauge in the middle of Sydney Harbour at Fort Denison, which is a lump of rock anchored to bedrock. And the level of the water over 125 years has risen 85 millimeters. That's a little bit, that's about 3.5 inches or something. 125 years. And one of the reasons it's even risen that much is that, and this is something, again, which none of the scientists discuss, if you go back over, we were in Ice Age about 12, 13,000 years ago. If you look at the temperatures after the Ice Age, we went up to levels much, much higher than we are now. And this is when great civilizations were born, like the Minoans and the Greeks, later on the Romans and the Hindus, which I think was the first religion developed. And that was, the Danish Meteorological Institute reckons it was 2 to 4 degrees hotter than today. And we know much closer to our time, only 1,000 years back when the Vikings farmed Greenland, that they were at least 1 degree hotter than we are at our average temperature today. Because as we speak, there in the ground, it is still permafrost. And in that, it carries buried Vikings, it carries artifacts and cooking utensils and things like that, which is still embedded in permafrost. And that ground would have been pliable, supple, maneuverable 1,000 years ago. So we know that they were hotter than we are today. So what did happen, though, is we went into what's called the Little Ice Age, which was about 400 to 500 years, when 1/3 of the planet died from starvation and cold. There was an extensive amount of cold for 400 or 500 years. There are absolutely simple scientific reasons for that, which I'm not going to go into now, but we will another time, I promise. We came out of that, and the temperature warmed rapidly to the beginning of the 1800s. And we've been slowly cooling down ever since. That we cooled down to probably, I think our lowest temperature was about 1910, and then we rose up again. And the reason why we're rising over the last 100 and 120 years is the oceans got very, very cold during that Little Ice Age. And as the temperature warmed, a lot of the frozen snow, the frozen rivers, all of those things melted and flowed into the oceans and kept them very cool for the last few hundred years. And the last 100 years, we've been warming up out of that. Now, as our oceans warm, they will expand. And that's your 85 mil that you're seeing in Sydney Harbour. And by the way, there's tide gauges all over the planet, and they all have similar readings. There's some in the Northern Hemisphere that's only showing about 100 mil. There's some showing even less. The accepted average is about 170 mil. I dispute that, but that's only 6 inches in 1,200 years. We're not going to drown. We're fine.
Yeah, and you make it sound so sensible, when you think about that, because it does make sense as ice and snow goes into the ocean over that period of time. It, obviously cools it, and it just makes sense, and then it catches up over a period of time, and that. So yeah, look, it makes sense, and we're going to talk about that if obviously people are interested in your view on that. Hearing you for this first little bit, we're going to be doing some follow-up discussions where you go much deeper into the science of climate change. But I guess if we can, yep. And I guess if we look at South Australia, where I am, for instance, we're paying one of the highest electricity prices in the nation. We've massive push towards renewables and everything that goes with it. And we're going to talk about a little bit today a bit more about obviously the cost and comparisons, and also the effect on this transition into environment and wildlife. But just talk us through a little bit about where you sit and what you see in regards to the cost comparisons to current energy production and what they've planned for, and for South Australians, obviously they're realising they're paying a hell of a lot more on electricity, even though there's some rebates coming through from the government.
Look, I'll treat this with a broad brush, but it's because you live in South Australia, I will mention my son lives there. He was a pilot with Emirates, but he's retired and he lives in Selleck's Beach, which I think he just sold his house and He's just living the life traveling. But of course, you have that wonderful $1 billion array of batteries down there, don't you? And I think you told me they switched them on the other day. They lasted for 7 minutes. That was good. That was 7 minutes worth of power. That was at peak time in Adelaide. So costs. Look, this is, and again, if we're talking misinformation, this is a huge area. Have you got that graph I showed you of the various costs of the various forms of energy?
Yeah, I'll just bring that up so you can have a bit of you can talk through that.
So while you're pulling that up, I mean, you will hear our good friend Bunny Bowen, who's probably one of the biggest morons running around Canberra at the moment. He's either unbelievably ignorant, or he's informed, but he just doesn't care. And it's all about him pushing this ideology, which happens to be a Labor policy. But anyway, we can discuss that one a bit another time. But that you will hear from people like that renewables are the cheapest form of electricity. And if you've got everything in place and all installed, it doesn't cost a lot for the wind to turn a wind turbine, or for the sun to bring some electricity out of a solar array. I mean, a lot of us have, I don't particularly, but a lot of people have solar on their roof, and it's quite good. It works well in a household application. I have nothing against it except the rotten cadmium that makes it up and how we dispose of that, because it leaches out the most toxic junk you've ever heard. So I don't know how we're going to get rid of all these solar panels, but that's another story too. The problem is, what they don't mention is that those massive, first of all, the cost of, let's say, doing mainly, because the biggest beef I have is probably the wind turbines. They are vile, useless pieces of machinery. They do a horrible amount of damage to our environment, but they are exceedingly expensive to install, operate, run, and get rid of. And they virtually make no electricity at all, which I'll explain now. For a start, you've got to buy the land and to install these things. The only place they function is on top. They need to be in windy places. So you take Queensland, we're trying to put down 3,000 to 4,000 of these monsters, and they have to put them on the tops of hills. Well, our ranges that flow from the Gold Coast right up past Cairns into the northern most of it is beautiful rainforest. So you're going to carve up the tops of these hills, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's very expensive to do that. The blades, they're hundreds of meters long now, and they weigh an absolute ton. They need 2 massive semi-trailers just to carry one, and to transport them is just a nightmare. They're all made in China, so we've got to ship them here, unload them from a dock, and then transport them up there and assemble the beasts. So enormous amount of cost for that. Now what they don't then mention is those things are sometimes we had a case in Victoria that the turbine motors were actually only lasting 4 years and had to be replaced. Maybe they've solved that problem, I don't know. But so they don't last that long, and they're very, very expensive. They're loaded with rare earths, magnets and rare earth materials, copper and all sorts of things. And then you've got the blades, who you'll often see them broken in storms and things like that, so they're not lasting particularly well. They also weather very badly, which again is something I'm going to talk about in a second, because that's horrific. And you've got to get rid of them when you're finished with it. But what they don't happen to mention is that, so you've got the costs of all those things, the cost of land acquisition, transport, construction, and then dismantling, that all they do is they assume that those things just magically arrive on the tops of mountains like a couple of these monstrous triffids or something and just do their business. Well, it's not that simple. But the worst thing about them is the wind. We've only got in Queensland, I think we're 20.5% efficiency. and we only get up to about 22.5% efficiency along the southern coastline of Victoria. So that means you're only getting effective wind for about 1/5 of the time. So what happens the rest of the time? We need it. We need electricity. We don't know when the wind's going to stop blowing. It's fine if it's 2 o'clock in the morning when we're all in bed. But I tell you, one of the most still times of the day is around evening, and that's when we all come home, plug in our electric vehicles, which I don't have, and cook and switch on the lights and watch TV, etc. So we have massive electricity usage. So what creates the wind? What creates the electricity? There is no wind. And of course, it's going to be a coal-fired power station or a gas-fired power station. So basically, if you've got a 1 or 2 gigawatt array of wind turbines, you've got to have a 1 or 2 gigawatt reserve. It's called firming of coal or gas. So they immediately come and switch on and fill in the gaps when the wind isn't turning. But it's worse than that. The electricity that a wind turbine makes is so poor. We can't control the frequency. We can't control what's coming out of those motors at the top. So we have to have all these inverters to build the electricity up so it's at the 50 hertz and the 240 volts that we need at our power point. And a wind turbine just doesn't make it anywhere near that. It's very, very low frequency electricity. It has to be boosted. So there's a massive cost in doing that. But at minimum, because you need the full power from a coal-fired power station or a wind turbine, they're operating continually. And I'll tell you why, because it takes you a day to boil the water to drive a turbine in a coal-fired power station. So you can't switch it off. You might disengage your electricity part, the generator, but your turbine gas and steam and things like that is being maintained at constant temperature. So basically, while your turbines are either operating or not operating, the gas-fired generator or the coal-fired generator is actually effectively at full speed anyway. So the wind turbines make absolutely no electricity by comparison at all. And then you've got, of course, we know that the electricity out of solar arrays is very good. But it's actually too much. So we've got to somehow, in the middle of the day for 4 hours with a couple of hours either side, we've got to tone that down, because what's happened in, say, France and Spain recently, they had kept building these arrays and it blew up the system. So they had enormous blackouts. So they've got to switch it off. But we do know that there's only daylight in the middle of the day. So they need the full array of coal or gas to fill in for those 4 or 5 or 6 hours where the sun's shining in the middle of the day. So virtually the only time that renewables, in inverted commas, is any good if it's sitting on your own roof. If you can time it to run your pool, maybe your air conditioner during the day. It can run your pool filtering system, a few other bits and pieces around the house, your vacuum cleaner, your TV if it's on during the day. If you want to use it at night, it's no good. You've got to have batteries. Those things are really expensive, and a battery actually is a highly inefficient way of storing electricity, which most people don't realize. You've got to put something like 5 times the power into the battery of what you want to pull out. So the solar panels will do that, but it's still very expensive, and they're only guaranteed for about 10 years, and we've got to get rid of the buggers. Again, a little bit further on, I'm going to have a big grizzle about lithium too. It's horrible. So cost-wise, you've got the little pictures there. You can see the size of coal, nuclear, gas against wind and solar power. And I'm sorry, there is no comparison. That's cost.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And just reading out the top line, so modelling found the additional costs of battery storage referred to as load balancing in our report, and overbuilding and curtailment resulted in wind costing $272 per megawatt hour and solar $471 per megawatt hour. When you compare the little graphs down the bottom, is $34 for coal and 27 for gas, and nuclear 37. So yeah.
See how good nuclear is there, the fourth one along. It's only a little dearer than coal or the levelized gas, natural gas, but it was a disaster how the Liberal Party sold their policy at the last election. We were all tearing our hair out. It was so badly done, because nuclear power will be great in our future. We've got quite a bit of coal, and we should get rid of that. And it's very efficient, and we've already got the transmission lines in to service all our 20 approximate coal-fired power stations that we've got around the country. We should keep every one of those, build a couple of new ones, and we would be right until we can start phasing in nuclear over the coming years. We don't need to rush to it. But the beautiful thing is that we'll be able to build nuclear power plants on coal-fired sites, because they're not that big. And also now, with all the new energy companies all over the world going towards nuclear, they've become very, very efficient, very, very compact, a lot cheaper anyway. I reckon in probably 50 years, nuclear will be half the price of coal, to be honest. Particularly in a country like ours, where we have so much yellow cake. We have a third of the world's supply. So it's madness not to use it.
Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense, but there's obviously been this real aversion to it, and I watched young Will Shackle in the Senate in inquiry into climate change, mis and disinformation, and he presented himself very well, made a very good case following some of his stuff. So look, and many other countries around the world, like you said, are adopting it, and there's still this massive fear campaign in Australia to prevent us going down that way. So something's got to give. There's definitely a deliberate agenda to some sort of agenda to make us want to go down this path there, David. I don't know, it's just I really can't work it out.
Oh, it's bizarre. But if the Liberal Party could get their, dare I say it, their shit together, if they could if they could get their act together, it would be such a no-brainer. Because all the science for this kind of stuff is there. This sort of documentation that you and I are quoting is readily available. It's out there. And I just can't believe how badly informed the Liberal Party actually seems to be, because they could be braining it. The Labor Party could get torn apart, and the Greens could get torn apart on this issue. Just cost alone.
Really, really strange. So, obviously that's the cost, and we can obviously, talk into a bit further, but that just makes a lot of sense when you look at, and that from that graph that I had up, it really just showed the overbuilding and curtailment. It was a significant cost on both of those. So that's what ties into what you were saying before about the whole extruding the rare earths to make it, the manufacturing, the transport, everything that's involved in actually getting it established is actually increases the cost overall above everything else.
Absolutely.
Yep, including decommissioning. We're talking decommissioning. We're talking lifespan of panels and blades and all that sort of stuff. But that kind of brings us in a little bit about, because you and I spoke about, and you wanted to talk a little bit more about the environmental side of things, because these things isn't just the higher cost in regards to getting it all established and out there, but it's the ongoing effect on the environment, and the wildlife. And that's something that concerns you quite a bit, isn't it, David?
Oh, definitely. It's before we go to that, there is one thing which I don't think you and I have spoken about too much, but I might just throw in there, because I think people are not aware of this, and they should be aware of this. How much of our energy is owned by China? Where they own, for example, companies like Alinta, which has all these wonderful ads with Pat Cummins, the Australian cricketer captain and things like that, is owned by Chow Tai Fook, a Chinese company. We've got Energy Australia is owned by the huge Hong Kong-based CLP. You've got the State Grid Corporation of China own a lot of our renewables and some of our power stations as well. The China State Power Investment Corp owns 68% of all your gas piping out of Adelaide to and from, and all of your gas reserves, because South Australia is loaded with gas, and all the pipes that carry that gas out of South Australia to other parts of the country, 68% of it is owned by the China State Power Investment Corp. So with the amount of even with these horrible little monsters like Twiggy Forrester, sorry, I just can't stand the man, Twiggy Forrester and Cannon Brooks and Holmes A Court and those people, the money they get is mostly Chinese. And the Chinese are involved in at least half of our actual power, coal-producing power stations, but they own an enormous amount. They back a lot of the renewable projects as well. So that's something most people don't understand. They will be able to switch us off. If we should ever end up going to war in China, we'll be black within about 5 minutes. A lot of the Chinese cars, as has been spoken about in the press, they'll just switch those off as well. They can do all of that by the internet. So it's something that I think should be recognised, but I'll just put that to one side, just so long as people are aware of that. And I would like to start talking about some of the environmental impacts of these monsters.
Yeah, no, and you raise a good point about that stuff, because I have done some articles and spoken into that about international companies owning Australian infrastructure, and even overseas corporations owning water rights and that as well. So there's a massive concern that many Australians actually don't realise about this, the amount of overseas companies that own our infrastructure, which is concerning. But yeah, no, definitely if we want to segue into the environmental stuff, because that's obviously really, really important too. And a lot of the groups that I've been following and looking at, one of their main concerns is the impact on environment and wildlife. And that's something that you're pretty passionate about as well, from the sound of it.
It is. The solar panels, if they can find a way to get rid of them, they're not too bad. Look, as an energy source, particularly on our own roofs, they are quite effective. They can save people some money. And I don't necessarily decry them. The big solar arrays that we've got on some of the farmland, where they've been placed next door to small towns and things, so one farmer becomes a multi-millionaire overnight, and all his neighbours have to put up with this stuff. The actual heat, they affect the whole temperature of the climate of that town. I mean, that is disgusting. So rural communities are being destroyed by these solar arrays, particularly in Western New South Wales and places like that. I feel so sorry for them. In Queensland, we are going to be and are slowly being affected by the big march of these monstrous triffids of these huge wind turbines. They're ranged across southern Victoria. They've got some in going up the ranges in New South Wales, but we're facing a huge amount of them on government land, which is basically pristine rainforest. I discussed this recently, the enormous carving of the tops of these beautiful mountains that they're going to be doing all the way through up our eastern range. You've got a couple of slides there that you can probably flick through to show it.
Yeah.
So you've got untold damage to, in some cases, near extinct plant species and things like that. And we were very involved in a big array, I hate calling them farms, just south of Cairns around Chilumban. And we managed to get that one stopped, because that was going to actually cause 2 or 3 species to become extinct. I think it was at least one bird, one bat species, but a lot of ground fauna as well was going to become extinct with what they were planning to do at Chilumban, and we got that one stopped. But there's so many other things that people aren't aware about. I mean, for example, let's talk about the basic thing of apart from carving up pristine rainforest, what about these big turning blades? Now, people kind of know in the back of their mind that yes, a few birds are going to be killed, but you know, what's a few birds between friends? What happens is the birds that get killed in these in the blades are all the predator species, so golden eagles, hawks, goshawks, even magpies and things like that. They're the ones that have trouble. They actually get sucked into the blades because some of their big wingspans, with the enormous amount of wind that is generated with them. And just one thing, I've just got to go back. Most of the time you see pictures of these wind turbines turning, those blades weigh tons and tons and tons. A gentle breeze is not going to turn them. They're turning because the turbine inside the motor at the top of the tower is being fed electricity to turn them, to get them started. And that happens in nearly every case. So they will be switched on by a turbine to turn these blades to get them going until a bit of wind can keep them going. So that's something a lot of people don't realise. So we're wasting electricity just getting them started. But so the big birds suffer enormously. But probably one of the ones that upsets me the most is bats. We lose in Victoria with just the turbines that you've got there now. I don't know how many hundred. I think it's about 1,000 turbines in Victoria, or will be, but I think there's some hundreds there now, and they're losing well in excess of 10,000 bats a year. Now the bats, by the time we finished our array, which will be 4,000 or 5,000 of these turbines all up and down the eastern seaboard, we'll be losing maybe 60,000, 70,000 bats a year easily. Many species of bats will actually become extinct. Now, how they die, they're gliders, bats in most cases. So they're going to, the wind will be coming through these big turbines and accelerated by these turbines. They will glide through with the wind. So they go through the back of the blade, whichever the wind is going, and as they pass through the blades, the air pressure on the other side of the blades is substantially higher. What happens is all the little blood vessels in their lungs explode. So they're going up, I don't know how many atmospheres is from one side of the blade to the other, but it kills the bats very effectively. So the blood vessels in their lungs explode and they drown, and they fall to the ground, and they pick up thousands of bats. I think we're talking in the US 70,000, 80,000, maybe more. I don't know how many now, these are old figures, of bats are killed per year. And there is already the talk of a couple of bat species in America very close to extinction. And they get their big, the national US emblem, the bald eagle, is I don't know how many hundreds of those have been killed by turbines in America. So in terms of the wildlife that they kill, yes, that's extensive, but it's worse. And this is, again, not many people know this. The blades on these turbines are made up of their big balsa wood blades, and they're covered with an epoxy. And that epoxy has a hardener in it called bisphenol A. And you can Google this stuff because it's there. Bisphenol A is weathered off the blades. If you have a look at these blades after they've been up, there's a lot of fabric on the ground. The bisphenol A in the epoxy does not chemically change. It stays as bisphenol A. Bisphenol A it's a horrible toxic element that affects any living thing. It affects their hormonal value. So you will get, in France, they've had chicken farms close to wind turbines where all the chickens are born blind. They've got sheep in America, for example, that are born with extra legs and stuff like that, and babies born with 2 heads, and it'll affect humans. And what happens, this stuff gets into the water table, And we're going to be putting thousands of these things up into the tops of our mountains where the water flows down from the mountains through all the coastal towns and where your dogs fill their water bowls, pumped from our springs on the Gold Coast. We all have bore pumps from our springs. You have springs flowing into our water catchment areas, and 1 kilogram of bisphenol A makes 10 billion litres of water undrinkable and dangerous. And we're going to be putting this stuff up into some of the most sensitive areas of our country, into water flows that we end up drinking ourselves. And that fills me full of horror. But it is a fact. And there are worldwide things happening about this. There's court cases and all sorts of things. So whichever way you look at it, the wind turbines are a disaster. They make no electricity. They kill people. And they're talking about putting them offshore. This will never happen, by the way. We will never have offshore wind turbines. I don't care what they say. The only place you possibly might is in the shallow areas between Victoria and Tasmania. You certainly won't on the East Coast. They were talking about having them off Port Stephens. This is where Bowen's so ignorant. We've got a continental shelf which drops out, and it's not that far. It's only a kilometre or so offshore, and then it drops down hundreds of metres. Now, ideally, to install these things, you would build them on pillars on the continental shelf, but then they'd be right off your surf beach. They know they would never get away with that. So what they're planning to do is build them further out into the ocean and float them and anchor them. And I've got to say, there is no model for this. They've never been done. I think they tried to do a couple of, the Danes tried to do a couple of it, and they weren't terribly successful. So they're talking about doing it offshore, anchoring these things. So they would have massive steel guy ropes coming down, probably in 8 different directions, to somehow they'd get concrete fixings down on the floor, which might be a kilometre down in some cases, or half a kilometre down. I don't know. It's just stupid stuff. But imagine a whale sliding through. He's not going to see those things. He's not going to even probably realise it. And he goes flat out at about 20 knots into one of these hawsers. It'll probably chop his head off. So those things just are not going to happen either. So really, I have a huge problem with those wind turbines. I really do. That we just should ditch them ad hoc straight away. We can look at some a little bit of roof solar and things like that, but not these wind turbines. They're horrors.
Yeah, I did a bit of an article when they were proposing the wind turbine off the coast of Kingston here in South Australia. It's since been shelved by the state government because of lots of concerns from other people. But there was definitely a lot of issues when I was doing a bit of research for that. There's obviously the leakage of oil, the thumping of the blades, the construction cost influence on the marine life, and there's just so many things. And just like on land, seabirds are also affected by these things. There's just so many challenges in regards to this for what a big what we believe now is a big scam, really.
Oh, it's shocking. I mean, they've tried to do the ocean-mounted ones off the east coast of America, Maine, and places like that. And the whales washed up on the beach, particularly during the early stages when they were using echo sounding. And so they put these very low frequency, high noises into the ocean so they can map the ocean floor. And that was disorientating whales. And they were, some very rare species were washing up on beaches at Maine and Port Nantucket and places like that. But even as you say, when they're up and running, if the wind is turning them, the noise they make, the thrumming of those enormous blades, I haven't mentioned that for the land-based one, but I can imagine they'd be absolutely horrific out in the ocean too, to any sea life around in the water, because the ocean is a great carrier of sound. So that sound would vibrate through that water. But horrific.
And then you've got obviously the transport, like to get it all out into the ocean and, develop them before you even get them stood up, and that there's so much impact on the marine life. Absolutely, absolutely. And that story about the bats, a lot of people don't say you see all the pictures online about the big birds and all that, but the story of the bats is, it's quite shocking, the amount of bats that are caught out by that, for sure. And what's your? I mean, I've got that image now that you also sent through about the massive solar, factory out covering all the hills and that. So, laying solar out obviously raises concerns with you as well, to the extent that this has been rolled out all over the countryside.
Well, it's as I said, it's actually changing the weather. It's destroying communities particularly in New South Wales currently, Western New South Wales, because, one farmer takes the 27 pieces of silver, or however many it was, and so he becomes a multi-millionaire. His neighbours have to put up the enormous heat, because these reflect the heat back up. It doesn't even get down into the soil. So it changes the whole ecology of the area, and it is destroying communities. It's tearing them apart, because some people they can be going out their back door, and there might be a couple of 100 metres to their fence line, and 10 metres from that fence line is what you're looking at, a massive, massive solar array. And I just feel so sorry for these people, and it's unnecessary. We don't need it. As I said, to get rid of them, there's some cadmium compounds and things like that are in the manufacture of these solar panels that is just horrific, and they're going to have to bury them. They'll be leaching into the soil, and it'll be ruining the soil. So, but there's some other aspects too. There's all the bits and pieces that you need for renewables, or this energy future. There's a lot of things we just don't realise. Like, for example, just to get to net zero, if we're going to make it to net zero by 2050 or whenever it is, 2060 or whatever it is, it's going to require 4.5 billion metric tonnes of copper. The known reserves of copper are 800,000 metric tonnes in the world. So somehow we're going to have to find 5,000 times more copper than we currently are aware of, that we're pulling out of the ground. Not only that, but you've got things like, currently we're pulling out 24.2 million tonnes of copper per year. We're going to have to increase that. If you divide that into the 4.5 billion metric tonnes, that's 186 years before we have the copper that we need. Well, that's not nowhere near 2050. So the same sort of thing is for every other rare earth or mineral that we use. So if it's 186 to get the copper we need, it's 9,920 years to pull out the lithium, and there's nowhere near the quantity. So we need the lithium for all those batteries. That's going to take us nearly 10,000 years. It's 1,733 years for cobalt. It's 3,287 years for vanadium, 29,000 years for germanium, and on it goes. We just do not have the rare earths available to us in the soil that we need to reach net zero worldwide. Cannot happen. But there's the other aspect too. Your lithium, for example, it is one of the most, I won't have a battery-driven car on principle because of the lithium and what they're doing. There's 15 main sites. They're opening up more all over the world where they're pulling out these rare earths. We really need these lithium batteries for all the important things, to put in people's pacemakers, to put in their hearing aids, to put in their small pieces of electronic equipment that are life-saving. This is what we don't need to be putting it into our cars and into our garages. But to dig up 1 tonne, to get 1 tonne of lithium, you need 2,000 tonnes of soil. To make 1 car battery, is 500,000 pounds of soil, which is 250 tons of soil to make one car battery. And if you've ever seen it, they have these huge lakes where they wash all these rare earths, and they wash them with acids and things like that. And for every ton of lithium that we extract and refine in the atmosphere, we pump out 1,341,000 gallons of this toxic sludge, which is made up of sulfuric acid, sulfur dioxide, and hydrofluoric acid mostly, which if you go to places like Bayan Obo, which is one of these rare site places up in China, and this is massive lake that's now just black sludge where they're washing off this clay to get to the rare earths. And you can draw a circle with a 300-kilometre radius around that lake, and the birth defects are already becoming apparent. They're killing their own population, maiming it to produce this stuff. We just don't need to do that. We're opening up rare earths in Australia now, so I hope we do a better job than the Chinese. So all of these things are horribly, horribly toxic.
Yeah, it's crazy just hearing that being explained, because a lot of Australians just wouldn't get that side of the debate or the story about all those things. I know that there's been some programs run and some documentaries that are sort of starting to get through there. I think Chris Ullman's pushes back a bit. He's sort of trying to share. Yeah, trying to share his information as much as possible, but the average, so many Australians just aren't aware of the stories that you've just, you've just highlighted. And this is the big thing. This is why we try to keep speaking out and sharing this information with people. And we're saying the life cycle, the recycling, the decommissioning, we're talking in a number of decades, when we know historically coal fire can last up to 100 years, those reactors. And is that the same for nuclear or more? I mean, these technologies.
Absolutely. And look, you don't have to redo your whole. You might just need to redo some of the electronics, or in the cases of a nuclear power station, they're all refurbished and things like that. You can reuse all the perimeter stuff and all the housing and stuff like that. You might need a new turbine in a coal-fired power station. That's all right. You just take out the old one, truck in a new one, and you're back in business. Probably, I would imagine the boilers would last for hundreds of years. I'm not sure. But if you have to unbolt a boiler and make a new, cast iron boiler and bring it back and install it, you don't have to build a whole new station. And the thing is, we've got the transmission lines to all of these sites all over Australia. As I said, there's 20 power stations. If we were to say now that right this minute, get all our power stations right back up to scratch, which would probably be building, I think we would be building 3 or 4 new, maybe 3 new ones, 4 new ones possibly, and we would be refurbishing some of the ones we have. The maximum cost we've worked out, and this has been done with Colin Boyce, who lives up at, he's the member of Gladstone, and he's in the industry and stuff like that. We're talking probably about 40-50 billion to get everything done, maybe as high as 70 billion depending on the land. And that sounds like a lot of money. Well, just the transmission lines that we're talking about to do to connect all the renewables that Bowen is talking about is $1.3 trillion. So we're talking about between 40 and 70 billion to get all this done, and you'd do it over the next 10 or 15 years. You'd hardly notice it within a budget, and they're talking about $1.3 trillion to do the power lines. The government organised this report done by an ex-Australian chief scientist called Robin Batterham, and he's a professor, and with 40 other scientists, some of them international, and they calculated that the cost for Australia to reach net zero, they said we wouldn't do it by 2050, but we could probably do it by 2060, would be between $7 and $9 trillion. Our current debt is only hitting about $1 trillion now, and they're talking $9 trillion will be in debt. Because what people don't realise when they talk about to reach net zero, people have no idea what it actually means. I'll tell you what it means. It's, for a start, you probably won't own a car. You'll have to take public transport. You will be allowed to have a car based on your credits of how good a person you are or what your job is. It will be electric. You'll be told what it is, and you'll probably have to pay it off for the rest of your life. You won't be eating any meat. You'll be eating, we won't have any farming whatsoever. That'll be gone. That with coal is our second biggest export, by the way. So we won't have the income from any of that. We won't have the income from any coal. I don't know what the country's going to manufacture. I'm going to come to, oh no, let me put that one in now. At the end of World War II, Australia was ranked 5th in the world. That was out of 120 countries. 5th in the world as an industrial nation per capita. Today, we're rated last out of all OECD countries. We have no industry. I can remember just a few years back, Huggies closing all their factory and going to China. So we don't even make our own nappies here anymore. It's just disgusting. The factory in Sydney that packages all the those chocolates and sweets that when you go to the picture theatres, you buy those, they're hanging on the wall. Their electricity bill a couple of years ago was $1 million a year. So we will have no industry whatsoever. So that is your future. So you'll be told how to live. You won't be able to travel more than, you're only going to be able to, what is it? I think the maximum travel you'll do is 15 kilometres from your home. So this is the lifestyle that they're trying to lay out for you, and they want us to accept it. Well, sorry, no thanks.
Yeah, 100% agree. And you and I will probably unpack that a little bit further, because you've done quite a bit of research. And I know a lot of people, and I've talked into it as well, about the global influence from, international corporatists and so forth over our lives. And some of those things we can probably, and I know that when we've spoken before, you've done a bit of research about where it's all coming from.
Our world is fine. Our polar ice caps aren't melting. The polar bears and the penguins are never been healthier in their lives. We're not losing them. The polar bear population has almost doubled in the last probably 25 years. So the world is fine. Our oceans are fine. Warmth is when we prosper. I think I made that point going back, we were 4 degrees hotter today when all the great civilizations birthed. It's cold that kills us. And that was proven in the Little Ice Age, a few hundred years ago. So our planet is doing just great. All the islands in the Pacific have grown by 2.3% on average over the last 2 decades. They're not disappearing. The Maldives are showing no loss or no increase in water levels at all in the last 40 years. So everything is fine. Our weathers are changing. I could go into, when we talk about the science a bit, I will go into the weather. What actually causes the weather on our planet? And the only thing I can assure you, and probably this is as good as anything to finish on, I can absolutely promise you neither our weather nor our climate nor what we feel when we walk out our front doors is controlled by carbon dioxide at all, let alone the tiny amount that mankind produces, which is only 1% of the world's climate. And if, as an Australian, you're panicking about what's happening, and why should we? We only produce 1% of the world's CO2. Why should we just totally destroy our economy, destroy our children's future, destroy our environment for the 1% that we contribute, when you've got countries like China, India, Russia, and America up around 60 or 70% of the world's CO2. Why should we do it? None of them even recognise, they're not even members. They might be members, but they don't do anything to do with the World Economic Forum or the United Nations and climate change. So why should we as Australians destroy everything that we hold dear for this fantasy? That's even if you believe in it, we only produce 1% of the world's CO2. So who cares? We can't change anything. Nothing we do will change the temperature of this planet. So for God's sake, Bowen, stop it.
Yeah, good call, and it's probably a good point to finish on. I really appreciate the little chat that we've had so far, and looking forward to the other ones we bring together. So, David, thanks so much for joining me, and looking forward. I did actually find a website for climate energy realists. They must have put something together for you, but there you go. So I brought that up as well. So no, good on you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And looking forward to catching up soon.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Could I have your attention for the next 3 minutes? I'd like you to see and hear something which we feel is rather special.
Here in this God-given land of ours, Australia, this proud possession, our own piece of earth, that was built by our fathers who pioneered our heritage. Here in Australia, the land of our birth. Our land, Australia. But should danger ever threaten us, let the world know we will answer the call.